that is immediate, or is this something that we should have been expecting a long time even before now?
Yeah. Again, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to talk about something that has been a big challenge to this country.
Mm-hmm.
Why now? There cannot be a better time anyway. It's a global change.
Mm-hmm.
We have the US trying to think inward and believe that this is the time they must think America.
Okay.
But in the process of doing this, from my opinion, Trump had taken it too far because America is a great country that have, by every intent and purpose, it resonates with the world. All of the platforms that are philanthropic in nature or that have economic reason in nature link to the United States of America. And so Trump coming in seems to have a drastic disruption of what America stands for as far as the world is concerned.
Okay. All right.
So for me,
Mm-hmm.
we are confronted with a very strong pressing issue
Okay.
that could significantly alter the landscape of development in Nigeria. Because the potential of this shutdown by the USAID it has a long-term,
Effect.
repercussion,
Yeah.
either to healthcare, education, or agriculture, or humanitarian assistance.
Mm.
For the past of the 25 years of my intervention as an expert in development sector, over 15 years of that have been in the USAID projects.
Okay.
And I had intervened in several USAID sectors and projects. And I can tell you, I am one of the casualties, if you want to use, for lack of a better language,
Yeah.
and I feel it because I know the intent of all of those happening right now with the issue about the shutdown of USAID that have already been replaced by the foreign states of United States Foreign Affairs, are the one that have taken over and have absorbed it. And so a lot of things have gone wrong.
Okay. All right.
All right, so
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank God. Now, USAID's suspension after over 3 decades in Nigeria, I don't think it's just administrative. I think it's quite symbolic, right? Now, do you think this signals a shift in how Africa is redefining its relationship with Western donors?
Excellently. That's a great question. We have begun this story of transiting that like the other call issue about being talked to donor issues,
Okay.
being guided by donors, funded by donors. Even the budget of each country in Africa does not seem to measure up or match up with the donors.
Okay.
So we kept saying it is time to begin a change of ideas.
Okay.
And then we brought in what we refer to as localization agenda. Localization agenda is a process by building intentional capacity
Okay.
of CSOs in Africa to be able to, on their own, stand and maintain integrity and transparency and accountability, and then begin to engage private sector, begin to engage the development component of each of those African states, and then begin to then wind down on dependent of donor organizations.
Yes.
We'll be talking about it, and we'll be trying to see that. But unfortunately, each time we think about it, we seem to see that many of the African countries or leaders look at the donor angle as the shortcut, or what we call the easy way out. But now it has happened. We have a president who insists that America first, America first, America first.
Okay.
So there are a lot of repercussions that have happened over all of the sectors,
Okay.
which of course, by the time we move on this discussion, we can unpack some of them as we move on.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
I think we can delve to those repercussions even right now, because of course there are lots of Nigerians to an extent that has benefited from the USAID project as well, and some Nigerians did not even know that most of these projects are coming from the USAID as it were. But let's talk about some of those repercussions right now. You know, the removal. You know, the U.S. government withdrawing as well to from funding some of these projects. What are those repercussions that we are going to be facing?
My dear, the stakes are high, and you will soon know that the kind of thing that happen at the lower level, I mean the community level, the local government levels, even at the state level, are not truly the budget that is passed at the state assemblies in Nigeria. They are not the budget. They are actually dependent on donors. Over in the last 5 years, 51.7% of USAID funding has been dedicated to health in Nigeria.
Yes.
While 32.68 has gone to humanitarian assistance.
Okay.
And particularly by the global health supply chain, which is responsible for the common diseases, that are pervading the country, like HIV/AIDS, like malaria, are almost completely funded by donors, international donors. And these donors have been funding even the routine drugs for HIV and AIDS, have been funding malaria drugs. And about $600 million agreement was recently signed with the African Development Bank, which was aimed to boost development of agriculture in the Sahel region. And that was shortly before Donald Trump became the president. That fund, as I speak, has been halted.
Of course.
It's no more, has not been released. 3 months moratorium that he gave to USAID, it has almost gone.
Okay.
And of course, there is no sight, that that fund is going to be released.
Okay.
Another thing you have to note is that with this funding that is withdrawn or shut down, about that we are likely to be finding about more than 50% rise in preventable deaths in the next 5 years, which is a big challenge. And maybe I will bring it to humanitarian level later.
Okay.
But let's even take a dive into issues about healthcare. In Nigeria, USAID has been the long standing cornerstone for Nigeria healthcare. Yeah. In 2023 alone, USAID released $1 billion. Verifiable. I'm not talking about figures that are not existing.
Yeah.
$1 billion. And 1.9 million was supposed of Nigerians are affected by AIDS, by HIV/AIDS.
Okay.
When I use the word affected, it means plus those infected and those that are their families.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is about one of the highest, globally. And they depend on antiretroviral drugs supplied through funding from USAID.
Yeah.
So that's approximately 1.1 million Nigerians are on HIV antiretroviral drugs, which is being funded by USAID.
Yeah.
In 2024, as we speak, USAID invested $60 million into a project called Strengthening Integrated Delivery of Health Services, CIDAS. And their focus principally is expanding access to HIV testing and treatment. And as I speak, experts are already warning because that funding has been reduced. Okay. And the drugs, which is supposed to be HIV, government are trying to mitigate, but they don't have as much money. I remember I heard they released $1 billion naira, for purpose of HIV AIDS mitigation. But that is a tip of the iceberg. And as I speak, some of those drugs they are supposed to get in the routine area, they get it every month. Yeah. They are not getting them. If you come to malaria, which is the major health challenge in Africa, in Nigeria, which kills much more than HIV, particularly the under fives. In 2024, USAID allocated 2.3 million US dollars for procuring malaria treatment tablets, and 4.8 million doses were then supposed to be released to combat that disease. That, of course, including distribution of insecticide treated nets, and then, of course, community awareness program, and other vital services, training of staff, health services, and all that. But as I speak with you, that funding went through. But we are now in 2025. Such control mechanisms are not in any way available anymore. So the reality about the Nigerian situation, particularly in relation to health, even as I speak, is that nurses, for example, in the northern part of the country that depend solely on USAID for training, are now having withdrawal support of such. Of course, that leads to issues about critical. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're with you. We're with you.
That leads to about critical shortage of drugs, trainings, and resources for quality care is undermined. And of course, imagine a woman in Puda with 10 children, with 6 children in the north, who depend on very cheap anti-malaria drugs. Very soon, they will have issues with that. Now, now the implication of that is that the work we are looking at is a time bomb in health, particularly malaria, particularly HIV/AIDS, and then other 5 issues that we do not seem to have understand that, which might be something that is going to be a calamity if we do not think of other alternatives. Now, even look at job situations. As I told you before, 15 years of my 25 years experience has been on USAID grant. I've always been on USAID grant. And I'm not the only one. Over 150,000 Nigerians are on development aid. Either FCDO, USAID, or Bankato, all of those big donors who are funding. And we have, as I speak, over 120,000 national NGO dependent on donor grants, either USAID or any other grant. The implication of what I'm talking about is that all of this group do not have the same resources. Now the USAID grant has stopped. I am at home. I'm now doing consultancy in some other places. Thank God I am the big players. What are the small players on the field? There is a particular project that USAID was funding called Feed the Future program. Feed the Future. It was meant to boost agricultural productivity, to create jobs in farming, including processing and distribution. That is shut down as I speak. The existing jobs that happen to them are not there. Particularly the rural farmers depend on fertilizers from donors. They depend on pesticides from donors. All of this, there is an investment they did for Kebbi State that had to do with an investment for support of smallholder farmers. The reality on ground is that over 70% of Nigerians living in rural area rely on agriculture as their primary source of income. And most of them are supported by USAID initiatives. So imagine one who is funded by that now having challenge with this thing. We are not talking about maternal and child health at all.
Okay, Dr. Thengard, thank you so much for that extensive explanation that you have given us, on some of the operations that have been affected by the pullout of USAID from the Nigerian system. But now some say it's time to just decolonize our developmental model, because for a very long time, you have also mentioned, we have seen a lot of dependence on the Western community. You mentioned communities like MacArthur Foundation. You have mentioned communities like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the USAID as well. Now, could this suspension reflect a growing fatigue in the West towards long-term African aid partnerships? Or is this simply a strategic realignment under the Trump-led Republican resurgence?
Okay. I'll answer it two ways.
Okay.
Yes, that angle is correct. We must think inward. We must begin to understand that but most of this funding that comes is not actually only for the even the country, the domicile country that they had released that funding for.
Okay.
I just paint a picture.
Okay.
When we hear 150 million dollar release for example, Feed the Future program,
Okay.
it starts from US.
Okay.
The grant is not released to a Nigerian organization. The grant is released to an international organization.
Okay.
And that international organization have their own office
Okay.
in the United States of America. And in that office, they have all of the paraphernalia, from project directors to project manager to all the accountants. They fill up that place. And their grant, the amount they receive in terms of salary is 3 or 4 times higher than what will be given to the locals. And then they come back to this country and then get some of the staff to come and still stay in the country, hire one of the best place, and then stay in those places, and then get staff locals. And when they get the staff local, the staff who are local are the one doing the work. Then they get Nigerian NGOs to implement or to work there. And that Nigerian NGOs are scattered maybe around the country. The 150 million that I mentioned, maybe they give 50,000 to one organization. They give another 100,000 to one organization. They have 75,000 to one organization. Let's say maximum they spread 1.5 million.
Yeah.
You know. I'm talking about 33 million. What about 150 million that I'm talking about? So by the time you do the tree, they will call it the tree analysis of the funded expenditure, you might just find out that over 50% of that grant actually went to issues about paying expatriates.
Okay.
Who are either coming to visit to see what you are doing, or for quality of care, or for research. They do all of that, but the real activities may only be for 25%.
Okay.
So now coming back to what you are saying, it is actually benefiting them. Now that we have over 39,000 staff of USAID globally.
39,000.
As I speak with you now, they are only less than 300.
Yes. Yeah.
And they are carrying placard in the US because that is their life. And so what am I saying? If it is wrong to say that Nigerians or Africans are the only ones that are feeling this pain. They also take it as a means of, ensuring a better life for themselves. But I'm back home in terms of reflection. We must recognize that it's not just that nothing good will last forever. We must recognize that until you get to the point of articulating confidence and authority and autonomy in whatever you are doing, you are not respected. You are only respected in the Committee of Nations when you have something to bring to the table. And Nigeria does not have a reason to get it at all. Because the kind of resources that we have in this country, can even fund major projects in the United States of America. Are we talking about the number of oil wells that we have, or even the number of the farmland that we have? The only 10% of Nigeria of USAID, 10% of farmers in the United States of America are the one, feeding the whole of Americans. Only 10%. But here you have vast lands, everywhere, and then we are still borrowing, or we are still looking for aid. So what I'm saying, in effect, is that we have so much within the country. If we decide to be committed to singular 3 areas, number one, issues of mineral resources,
Okay.
which are vast. It's not just oil I'm talking about now. They are just vast everywhere.
Okay.
They are just vast. Number two, farming. Investing, deliberate, intentional on farming. When you conquer hunger, and that will reduce unemployment, and people will not be restive. And number three, the oil that we have. If we focus on these 3 with good leadership, we will not need to be supported by the low-level local government activities that they claim to have, drugs and all that. We will support the process. But like I said at the beginning, we must begin to recognize that all of these support that international organizations are doing are not just for Africa alone. they are benefiting from it
All right.
much more than even the Africans.
Africans. Oh,
So,
wow.
Dr. Thangood, of course, you've mentioned it in passing, but maybe just a little bit of elaboration as well, too, if you don't mind. Talking about, Africa, Nigeria having the resources to even fund some projects
By
in,
ourselves.
in the US as well, too. Now, right now that the US it has been cut off, is it the right time now that we begin to have some of these tough conversations? When it comes to budget allocation, when it comes to reforms as well too, because it seems like in as much as we have all of these resources, we are still dependent,
Yeah.
on foreign aids, whereas we can actually give this aid even to the foreign countries
Yeah.
at this
So,
point in time.
yeah.
So we've been totally dependent so much. But is it a good time now for these tough conversations to be had?
Yeah.
Both in Parliament as well to both in the House of Senate as well to in government. Talk about reforms. Talk about budget allocations intentionally as well to Dr. Tangad.
That's my brother. You see, as we look at, the more we look deep into a lot of policies within the country, the more you begin to wonder whether people truly go there for the purpose of development, whether they are truly Nigerians who are interested in development,
Okay.
or Nigerians who just got there by chance and then say, "This is my turn."
Okay.
How do you have a Trump in January who clamped down on nations and then shut down USAID, and there is no national conference on emergency on common diseases, where you now bring in technocrats who knows what these are about to think through this and then begin to do a budgetary allocation by emergency.
Technocrats in Nigeria.
Yes.
Yes.
To address the
By
issue.
technocrats in Nigeria, have a sovereign conference, whatever you want to call it. Now they are doing the constitutional review, zonal discussion right now,
Yeah.
which happened just last week. And you look at the budget, there is no still significant amount that is given to health.
No.
Not to talk about recognizing the gap that is created by the donors' fatigue
Exit. Yeah.
for language you are using, you know. And then you are not even seeing a deliberate word coming. All that we are hearing, nobody, even people are going for negotiations. We are talking about this thing. I mean, I maybe not be, I may be rotting in terms of news, and maybe I don't know this, but I've not heard anybody in Nigeria deliberately going for whatever deliberations that will improve the Nigerian budget for
Okay.
these common diseases.
Okay.
And so, like you said, this is the right time to ask ourselves the tough questions. Tough questions that, do we really need aid? Does aid help Nigeria? I mean, do we begin an internal search to make sure that the array of you that are truly doing great things when they leave this country and when they're in this country are truly channeled to a positive direction? This is something that we have. How do we begin now to look at it as a way of driving a change by innovation?
Okay.
From our young persons.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, so these are my thinkings.
All
All right,
right.
doctor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Thank God, for joining us. Now, we're already a few minutes past the half of the
Yeah.
hour. We just need to go on a very quick break, so that we can get back and keep up with this conversation. Thank you so much again for taking out time to be here with us.
You're welcome.
All right. Now, guys, our guest has been on ground, fully on ground. And for someone who has the wealth of experience working with USAID, I mean, 15 years, that's
25 years,
half.
you said,
He said 15 years.
Oh, okay.
That's like half the time of their operation here
Yeah.
in Nigeria. That's quite a rich experience, especially when it
is.
comes to, dealing with matters of, healthcare, because they have tremendously assisted in the development of healthcare systems here in Nigeria. But the conversation does not end here. We're going out on a very short break. The numbers that you can send your messages or your contributions to will be displayed on the screen. But when we get back from this break, we will attend to these questions, and then we'll have the guests, come right back in to address some of them. Keep it locked in.
the men and women shaping the future of Nigeria. Get to know your representatives at the National Assembly. From lawmaking to constituency projects, we'll take you behind the scenes and inside the chambers of the Nigerian National Assembly. Learn about the bills they are championing, the challenges they are facing, and the impact they are making in their constituencies. We'll also bring you closer to the people they are serving and the stories that shape their work. Join us on NAS Watch every Friday on Rapid Television at 7 p.m. So get informed, get engaged, and get to know the leaders shaping Nigeria's future.
Rapid TV, rooted in truth, driven by impact.
Correro, your front row seats to the most pressing issues, from the corridors of power to the heart of our communities. We bring you unfiltered insight, fearless journalism, and the conversations that matter. My name is Natural Prince, and I invite you to this big conversation table as we analyze the top stories, ask the tough questions, and hold power to account. News that informs, analysis that empowers, debate that drives change. Correro, the big conversation, every weekday at 7 p.m. only on Rapid TV.
All right, welcome back and thanks for staying with us. It's still Rapid Dawn on Rapid TV. And if you're just joining us, we have been talking about the exit of USAID from Nigeria and some other African countries.
Yeah.
Now, like you asked Dr. Thengod a very important question, which is, could it just be a call for responsibility, like starting to have the difficult conversation? Because I know that Nigeria has what it takes to be able to, you know, to be able to fend for ourselves in the best way possible. I think it's a structure problem. It's not a resources problem. No. But yes, thank you so much, Dr. Thengod, again for being here with us.
My pleasure.
All right. Let's move on to the very next question, which is like going back to the basics. Because the first time that Donald Trump came out to speak about USAID and its operations, people were suspended, and across NGOs, across organizations that were heavily funded by USAID, we saw a complete, like a very drastic downsizing of staff members, you know, where people, establishments that has about 100 staff members were completely slashed to like 30, you know, a very serious downsize was done in some of these organizations. Now, one of the major things that Donald Trump said before all of this began, of course, there were whispers that some African governments have misused the aid or failed to meet accountability benchmarks. You have made mention of the fact that heavy resources are being sent into Nigeria, especially to deal with cases like malaria, which has bedeviled our nation for a very long time. Until date, I can't say that we have made very significant progress with dealing with malaria, as I personally get down with this every single month, every single month, and a couple of other people get down with this illness every single month, especially now, of course, that we have, you know, the rainy season and we have mosquitoes moving up and about. So, and we still purchase malaria drugs for as much as 5,000 naira upwards now, regardless of the sponsorship that has come into Nigeria to fund malaria programs. So is this suspension a response to the local inefficiencies, or is it a scapegoat for U.S. political shifts? What do you think?
But just let you know that this suspension is it's not for Nigeria alone. So that we must establish.
Of course.
Hello?
Yes, go on. We're with you.
Yeah, so you know, Trump came with his tie. And right from his campaign up to now, he said American first, American first, American first.
Yeah.
And what he's doing is not affecting Nigeria alone.
Yeah.
USAID that we are talking about that have been scrapped. I can use that word carefully now and completely because there's something like USAID again.
Again.
He has subsumed it into the Foreign Affairs Department,
Okay.
who are now is like a department under Foreign Affairs,
Okay.
who are now involved in agency for capital development issues around development of United States for agency for capital development was supposed to be for development, that international development that he has moved it to that. Now there's something like AIDS on it anymore. USAID was not meant for AIDS before,
Yes.
but it was really meant for international development. Like this African Bank, like this World Bank, to be able to help build human capital development and other infrastructure. That is what they are into now. Now, so it is not, we won't say it is because of the inefficiency. Otherwise, other places like other places outside of Africa who are also benefiting from USAID also have the same cuts. So
Yeah,
the
yeah,
USAID.
but Donald Trump made mention of the fact that the whispers are not just about Nigeria now. Misuse or inefficiencies in African leaders.
Right.
It's not just Nigeria. It's the same talks. Not just
Good.
Nigeria, other African
Good.
countries
Yes.
as well.
Yeah. Now on that route, I want to say clearly
Okay.
that we have never helped matters in terms of expenditures and transparency and accountability.
Okay.
We are so full of impunity in management that is shouting on the rooftop.
Okay.
We are not concerned about processes. We are not concerned about how things happen. We call it a book. Even right now, the money. Let me narrow down this country, Nigeria.
Okay.
The money that is being used, extra budgetary money in terms of finance, is even higher than what is budgeted for. For example, the coastal road that is being done right now was never a budget in Nigeria.
Okay.
And then the processes of bidding, when I was leading to the minister, I'm sorry I'm going this way, the minister of works, he told us clearly that they didn't do open bidding. They just saw somebody who had an experience in it and know that the person can do it, and they feel he can go ahead. And so those are not processes that any reasonable government that know what is process and what boundaries means, what policies mean, we hear and will not quickly safeguard their own. Because the money that they are sending to Nigeria or any other country are American people's money. It's a tax money. And so, yes, the impunity that we give to processes is not hidden.
Okay.
And so that is one of the reasons why we are now discovering clearly that other governments are saying, wow, we must work to ensure that we do not allow our money to be part of those corrupt tendencies. I remember one of the foreign secretary that came, he said Nigeria is too rich to be poor and too poor to be rich. So the impunity is a challenge, and that is even the reason why, as I speak, we are still not getting that proactive gathering to think forward, on what the level next, which I hope we will be going to in terms of what do we think we should do. At least as an expert, I can offer some kind of advice on what I think is possible to be done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, before we get down on those advice on what could be done as well, too, looking at Nigeria as a nation, somehow, when one door closes, we always find a way to open another door. The USAID basically has been that foreign body that's always giving assistance to the nation Nigeria. Now, when it comes to things like this as well, of course, we've seen speculations that even with the infusion of the USAID, for over 3 decades in the nation Nigeria, there's also been some interference, politically, by the US government. Now that the USAID has pulled off, there could also be speculations that maybe those interference will also be taken off. But Nigerians might also want to have a shift, either to get down to the EU nations or to also get down to China, looking out for, similar aid or investment right now. When that happens, do you think that is going to be a better move to make right now? Or again, is it important that we need to begin to look properly inward instead of looking out for alternatives, whereas we can generate these things for ourselves?
You're not speculating. You're not saying it could be. It is already It is already happening.
Okay.
It is already happening. There's already a shift in the kind of a paradigm shift,
Okay.
where most government now are now gradually moving to another aid-dependent kind of approach, where they are visiting a lot of places. Some of them are going to China, some are having now going to France, other people are going to, the FCDO that we know that is part of those that are donate. Also huge donors, they are going there. So there is a shift into other countries. Recently, our president went to Saudi Arabia. So there is this shift that is moving, where they still believe that funding. And I also want to tell you the truth that some other donors have increased their grant portfolios in order to see how they can accommodate. For example, the GIs, the German support donors, they have increased their portfolio. FCDO have increased their portfolio to see how to buffer some of those shortfall. And then, of course, that definitely will not be enough, because USAID even funding some of the world body like United Nations, World Food Organization, and the World Trade Organization. They were funding all of them, as it were. And so, going back to your question in terms of whether this approach is the best approach, I will just simply say is another shortcut.
Okay.
It's another shortcut that we are driving at. It's very easy for other countries now who are interested in our oil or mineral resources to quickly want to see how they can bridge the gap and benefit maximally. Remember that Nigeria is a hugely populated nation. You know how the population that investors will be interested in. We also have all of the mineral resources. We are the giant of oil. We are the giant of farming. So they will take advantage of it in the name of we are coming to collaborate. And again, will be quite interested, because just building as I speak with you now, some countries are coming in to be negotiating from each state to another on how they will build rails. Rails all over the country.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, those are all shortcuts, which naturally does not translate to development. So, like you said, what we should be thinking of is how to learn from the long-term donor-dependent approach, and how we can now, on our own, develop our own strategy and innovation that is internally driven. And of course, we have all of them. It may take a process, it may take some time, and drive it by way of a sovereign conference or a conference of technocrats, in this country, to help address some of the major gaps that have been done by reason of donor interventions.
All right, sir.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Thangod. You've been quite helpful, in this conversation here today. Now, let's ask the very final question. In your experience, what have you seen that we can learn from? What should Nigerians urgently change in its donor relations strategy moving forward?
I will just try and just list some of them. Number one is that is what we refer to in NGO world alternative funding mechanism. That is a component where we think locally and build our local structure. And we know that the private sector in this country are very versatile. But there is no relationship between the public and the private sectors. Government are not being intentional in seeing how they link public sector also become like a business enterprise, where the private sector who have the ingenuity can work with them. So if we can foster partnership with the private sector, so that we co-fund critical programs in healthcare, education, and agriculture, it will go a long way to have a local solution to a global problem or a pandemic that we are seeing. Under the same component of alternative funding, I am advocating for establishment of a national development fund, which will create a dedicated fund to support essential services. They are already doing this tax reform they are saying right now. If you find technocrats together and ask them to manage a percent of that money for financial resources which are available through the funding gap, all we just do is that it will just be for national development fund, and that is basically not for infrastructure, but for these common elements that are, rampaging this country. Then number two component I want to suggest is being deliberate. Nigeria should be deliberate about what we call human capital development. There is no replacement for education. And I don't know how they do it, but I just did that many ministry go on train for years. And even when they want to be trained, you find that the government in itself take the money away and then they just find a place to say they are trained. But training, investing in training for public sectors, investing in training, empowering decision makers in training them, making them to understand how to do this is ensure that the funding to each of those areas are becoming effective is key, particularly to that point. I am happy with the tax reform, which is domestic revenue generation, and that tax reform, as you go, if it is well utilized, we might just find some kind of relief, that is directed to critical sectors in Nigeria. And then we must, whether we like it or not, we must engage with international donors. No, in the years I spent in my 15 years by my colleagues, there is no program that is designed by Nigerian where do not look at and say this is where Nigeria is interested in, fund this place. Now, every donor just come with their own portfolio. I decide this is where I want to fund, and they just go on. But if you go to Ghana, and I've been to many countries, if you go to Ghana here, they have a template that shows in each sector their area of priorities, and then the donor that is coming there must ask for the national priority work plan, action plan, and that action plan is what they feed into, and so that now helps them to improve on critical infrastructure. That's what happens in Nigeria. And so I want to say, if they have to engage with international donors, they must engage them to actively see funding in relation to priority areas.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Thank God. I wish that we had a little more time so that we can expand on some of these ideas. But our time is fast spent. I mean, it's our call to exit the studio pretty soon. But we enjoyed every single bit of our conversation with you this morning.
Thank you so much. I'm privileged to be part of this.
Thank you so much, sir. So we'll be wrapping up right about now. Thank you for being here again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And of course, lots of conversation we've had this morning talking about the exit of the USAID, from Nigeria and some African countries as well too. And salient point he has raised. I mean, the last point he made as well too, talking about Ghana having a template, Nigeria not having a template. That still brings me back again to the kind of structure we have. We run even from our government, where everybody just want to do what they think is right for them. But not really paying attention to where it actually pains us, as a nation. And that's, I think, one of the places that we've also missed it out, both from the higher cadre to the lower cadre. And it's important that if we must develop as a nation, then we must align together. We must collaborate. We shouldn't do things independently, the way we've been running around in our nation doing stuff.
All right. And today's conversation isn't just about dollars or money. It's about dignity. It's about development and Africans' right to chart its own course. You heard him say it's still a shortcut if we're trying to look for the next possible donors. We can't stand on our own 2 feet. It's important that we find out how we can do that rather than keep looking for who to leech on. I think this puts us in a very vulnerable state because now the cost of HIV HIV drugs
It's going to increase.
has gone up. Malaria drugs and the drugs that are being sponsored by these organizations will automatically skyrocket.
It's crazy.
But this is the much that we can take on the show today, and I sure did have a good time.
Oh yeah, I did as well too. I'm looking forward to tomorrow already. You know.
Amazing time with you guys. All right, thank you so much again for being here with us from the hour 7 up until now, and we will be leaving the studio right about now. But before we do, it's important that you know that we are active across social media platforms, on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, on X, which was formerly Twitter. We are at Rapid TV. Just check us out at Rapid TV. You know, engage our posts, like and share to as many friends and family as possible. Now, if you would like to rewatch every one of the episodes that we have had here in the studio, it's important that you know that you can visit our YouTube page at Official Rapid TV. With just a click, you can relive the moments that we've had here in the studio. Also, you pretty much can go anywhere in the world with us with just our one-step website, www.rbnradiotv.com. And with that, we bring a close to today's show. It was an amazing Monday. Do not forget, I am Martha Alu, but you can call me Martha.
And of course, I am Victor Ake. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow for a more interesting conversation as well too on the Rapid Dawn.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.